Former White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney has some opinions about Rudy Giuliani taking the lead on Trump campaign's legal efforts. Let's take a listen.
So there's time to do this. I think it's the right thing to do. I still am a little concerned about the use of Rudy Giuliani. It strikes me that this is the most important lawsuit in the history of the country, and they're not using the most well-noted election lawyers. There are folks who do this all of the time. This is a specialty. This is not a television program. This is the real thing. And I was struck by a couple of things that Rudy said in court yesterday. So on one hand, I think it needs to go forward. It absolutely does. I wish that it was being prosecuted a little more efficiently.
Brutal. Yeah. Back with us to discuss our Democratic strategist and council member at large for Montgomery County, Maryland, Will Jawando, and also senior policy analyst at the Independent Women's Forum, Inez Stepman. Always great to have both you guys.
Mm-hmm. Good to see you guys.
Good to see you.
Inez, let me start with you. Just, I think it'd be pretty hard to argue that Giuliani has been super helpful to the president's case. On the other hand, they've had a bunch of lawyers who have dropped down of cases because they weren't willing to basically go as far as the president wants them to go. So what did you make of the comments there from Mick Mulvaney?
What, that Rudy Giuliani hasn't actually, appeared in a courtroom as a lawyer since dinosaurs walked the earth, and that election law is extremely complicated? No, I think those are probably fair comments to make. On the larger topic of these lawsuits, though, I like Mick Mulvaney. I absolutely support them going forward. And I say that even though, if you put a gun to my head, I probably would say, if I had to bet, that the level of fraud, even though there is fraud in every election, and particularly in some of these machine-style city politics, there's absolutely fraud. If you put a gun to my head, I'm guessing there probably wasn't enough of it to affect the election. But I'm not going to take the word of the same people and the same institutions telling us about norms that, prosecuted the case for 2 years that the president was a Russian spy dependent on Putin, right? Or all of the other things that have happened in the last 4 years. So I want to see the evidence. I think this is sort of put up or shut up time for the Trump campaign. I'm open to the idea that there was substantial fraud, but it's time to show the evidence. And, having Rudy Giuliani prosecute the case in court may not be the greatest strategy if it's put up or shut up time.
I'm with you, Inez. I mean, look, I said I'll entertain it. I mean, if they show us the evidence, we've gone through every single lawsuit that they have filed. We have read here on this show, 1 for 25 so far in court. And like you said, I mean, they'll promise things like the Kraken or whatever. Okay, release it. I'm waiting. I would love to see it. I really would, to see the evidence. Will, what do you make of that point, though? I do think it is fair to say, look, I mean, it's a raw thing to be criticized by many people who did not accept the results of the 2016 election by and large and pushed, Russiagate and so much more. Hillary famously, pumped a lot of these scenarios. Oh, if it wasn't for Russia, I would be president. Do you think that that's a fair criticism from some people who are like, don't lecture me?
I don't. I think it's apples and oranges. I actually think the level of representation that Rudy Giuliani is providing in these cases is commensurate to the actual level of the actual claim. I think Mick Mulvaney's got it wrong. I think this is exactly the only people you can get to go in court and make these arguments. And you've seen it with other lawyers who have been pressed by judges. Are you alleging fraud? All the things I'm sure you all have reported. People don't want to risk their licenses. You can't get those top-notch election lawyers that he's talking about because they know that these are baseless claims. You said it, 1 for 25, and the one was move a couple feet. I mean, these are not serious claims. And I think to compare it to what happened with Russia, where we know the entire intelligence system said that there was massive interference in favor of Donald Trump, was it enough to sway the election? That's something that no one will know. But I think those are totally different things. And I think actually this pursuit is damaging the country. And the longer it goes on, the more farcical claims made by Rudy Giuliani and others, I think it hurts the peaceful transition of power, and it's not good for democracy.
I mean, Inez, I am sympathetic to your point, especially about people feeling like they're getting lectured from folks who didn't really accept the legitimacy of the result last time around. However, two wrongs do not make a right here. There's no evidence of fraud, large or small, frankly, at this point. They've filed what they're going to file in court. Georgia's getting set to certify the results tomorrow. I mean, you have to admit, Will's right. Yes, Russiagate was damaging too, and I was the first to critique it. But this is incredibly damaging for the country, what the president is doing right now, what Rudy Giuliani is doing right now in service of his own payday. And so the fact that Democrats were poorly behaved last time around, that's not really justification here.
Well, first of all, once you let those kinds of to speak a little bit about those norms that we're always, yakking about, once you break them, it's very difficult to spin that back. And we see that with the slide of Supreme Court confirmations from being, 98 to zip, right, to everyone being a completely partisan fight, even a completely unfair partisan fight. So that's one thing. And two, this really isn't that unusual. I mean, we have had contested elections in the past multiple times, right? So, and not just in 2000.
This isn't really a contested election. The president lost, and he refuses to admit it. And he's out there floating all sorts of insane conspiracy theories. Like, that is not a thing that we've experienced before. I've made sure on this show to lay out, like, he doesn't have a path, and a lot of this is theater, and no, it's not a coup, and everybody calm down, it's going to be fine. But we have to acknowledge what he's doing is insane. This is not something we have. This isn't like just, this is normal and this is what happens. This is not normal. This is not what normally happens.
I actually just disagree from a historical standpoint. Pursuing these kinds of lawsuits, I mean, maybe not the particularities, but alleging that there were...
Give me an example where a president loses 306 electoral votes. I mean, this is the level of, loss that he sustained. Granted, it was narrow. Give me an example where a president, after he lost, comes out and doesn't say, look, I'm going to challenge these things, but says, I won the election, which he tweeted in all caps, I think.
So your contention is the thing that's different about this from 2000 and from when, for example, Nixon lost and when even going all the way back to Andrew Jackson, who lost and then came back and won the next election after the so-called corrupt bargain, right, which actually historically turned out not to be corrupt, right? The difference is that Donald Trump is declaring victory on Twitter. Okay, I guess that's new, but the fundamentals of pursuing these kinds of allegations are not new. Yes, he's doing it in a more bombastic way. He's Donald Trump. But I don't think the underlying fundamentals of this are unheard of in our democracy. And I do think that we can handle these kinds of lawsuits. We'll have a certified president on December 14th. There's a reason the Constitution lays out this longer period of time. There's a reason that we don't swear in a new president, the next week after November 3rd, right? So I do think there are institutions in place for this. And I'm not fundamentally that worried. I do think these things should go through the courts. I think it's totally legitimate to pursue them through the courts.
Will, you're going to have millions of people who never accept the results. I mean, respond to Inez what she said there.
Yeah, and, it's fine to not like the results. I wasn't happy last time, but I acknowledged, everyone acknowledged either privately or publicly that Donald Trump won the election. I think this type of enabling, and I like Inez, and I think she's a very smart and intelligent person, but this is the problem with the Republican Party and Republican leadership right now. Everyone should be able to say, and there are Republicans who have said it, this is wrong. The election was lost. He should transition power. He's literally costing people lives. We talked about the coronavirus. Dr. Fauci and others have said if we don't transition properly as far as the virus and vaccine distribution, you have the GSA. This is so much deeper. It's not like it's not affecting things. It's not just him saying things on Twitter. They are not allowing for the normal transition of power in the middle of a pandemic. And the fact that Republicans can't say you lost, do the right thing, run again in 4 years if you want, have your son run, I don't care. But that's the problem right now. And that's why this is different. It's unlike anything in history. And the fact that normal, moderate Americans of any party can't say that, that's the problem right now.
Well, I don't know, because here's the thing, Will, as referenced, there are millions of Democrats who don't think that, Trump legitimately won the election in 2016. And there are a lot of people who don't think Bush legitimately, I think there's probably a better case, in 2000.
Yeah, but that doesn't excuse
No, I'm not.
the
No one's
behavior.
excusing anything. And so that's the question, Inez, is that how should we look at and contest these claims? Because like I said, we read every lawsuit here and they basically have been up to nothing. In 2000, it was 500 votes, not several tens of thousands of votes across several different states, and it was different constituencies. And it wasn't the same level of contestation or recount or any of these other things. The best case that I see from a lot of these people is when they become amateur statistical samplers, which is not something that you can prove in a court of law. So aren't they just extending this without much reason?
Look, I just don't know. And going back to my original point, I'm not willing to take the institutional word for it. And I think millions of other Americans are not willing to take that on trust or on word. So I'm perfectly happy to see Donald Trump pursue these cases in court. Now, if he continues to come up with butt kiss, then the electors will vote on the 14th. And we will have a new president, Joe Biden. I have no problem saying that. But I don't think, I just don't think this is unprecedented, other than in certain ways that Donald Trump is always unprecedented in the fact that he's uncouth and he says it in a vulgar way. And I'm sorry, with all of the sort of institutional slide of this country, the fact that he's more vulgar than other presidents who have contested their elections in the past or alleged fraud in the past, that difference to me is not important. It just isn't important compared to the major issues in the country. Now, do I think this is bad for the country? Yeah, I also thought it was bad for the country for the last 4 years that millions of Democrats and elected officials, right? Not, just people on Twitter, but elected officials refused to acknowledge that Donald Trump was a legitimate president, and a lot of policy and a lot of our national sort of drama that has played out for the last 4 years have been really that working itself out through our system. So I'm not really willing to accept it on trust at this point. But I do.
That's fair. That's fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah. However, what we've done here is looked through every single one of their lawsuits, and even if the ones that are remaining all went their way, it wouldn't be enough. The results of the election would not change. So the bottom line is, they're trying to cause a scene. They're trying to create doubt and confusion in people's minds. I understand why people do not trust the media, but that institutional slide and decline and lack of trust, he is doing so much to contribute to that and exacerbate it right now.
Look what happened in Wayne County. Look what happened in Wayne County.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. All right, we're going to have to leave it there, guys.
I know, there's a lot there. I know what you're going to say. I'm sorry. We have to go. It's been a great discussion. We appreciate
it. Great to have you
both.
We appreciate you both.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good to see you guys.
Mm-hmm. Coming up, job numbers are out today. Washington Post economics reporter Jeffrey Stein is going to talk about that and a chance for a stimulus, slim one, I think, when Rising continues.